Did you know that sickness and disease is not normal and that your body can actually heal itself? See, the problem is that we call sickness normal because it's so common and it happens to almost everybody. But 93% of the leading causes of death in the USA are entirely preventable. So, what this means is that there's nothing natural about what we're calling natural causes of death. The truth is that your body is designed to heal itself. And in this episode, we're meeting with Dr. Barbara O'Neill, one of the internet's most beloved natural healthcare experts. Now, not only is she gifted in cellular biology and science as a naturopath and nutritionist, but she also holds the secrets of our ancestors and the natural healing methods that humans have been using for thousands of years to heal themselves using natural solutions that you can often grow in your own backyard. Now, in this episode, we'll be discussing the links between food, sickness, leaky gut, and pharmaceuticals, as well as the problems with modern medicine, how much trust we put in our doctors and pharmaceutical companies, and of course, we're going to detail some of the natural solutions that we can use to heal ourselves and to get back in tune with our bodies. Now, if you don't know who Dr. Barbara O'Neill is, she's an extremely gifted international speaker who talks about natural self-healing and shows that if the body is given optimum conditions, then it can heal itself from damn near anything. She's an author, educator, naturopath, nutritionist who's raised 8 children in the rainforest of all places, and she's a specialist in women's and children's health. Now, she's one of the most quoted, replayed, duetted, and searched health experts in the world, and nearly every single one of her videos has gone viral through her own channels or through someone else sharing her content. I'm so excited to share this message with you so you can learn to heal your body naturally. So please enjoy this podcast episode with the great Dr. Barbara O'Neill. Barbara O'Neill, thank you so much for being here with us on Reversible.
It's great to be here, Josh.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. There's a lot of guests that we bring in who are just some of the best. And I have to tell you, without bias, as long as my other guests don't hear this, I've been looking forward to this one more than any other for a very long time. I've been following you for years. So this is an absolute treat.
Well, it's great to be here. And as you and I know, we had a few hiccups at first, but we're here.
Well, tech doesn't befriend me either. I'm still figuring out light bulbs and microwaves and how all that stuff works. So.
Yes, true.
So, Barbara, for the listeners who may not be familiar with who you are, can you tell us a bit more about your background?
Well, I'm actually a lady that raised my kids in the rainforest. I was a bit of a back-to-nature hippie lifestyler, and I was very early disillusioned with the medical profession and I didn't want to give my children drugs. I thought there must be a better way. And so I found information from old ladies. So let's have a look at the timeline. We would probably be looking at the even the late 70s, early 80s. And of course, the people that I talked to, a couple of old ladies, they're in their 80s then, late 80s, they're not with us anymore. So I feel a responsibility to be able to share what these ladies did. It's almost information that has been lost. And I do all in my power to make sure it's not lost any longer. And I also found great results. The children would get better. And I thought, this is it. And then probably maybe in 1981, I became a Christian, and then I looked at the body a little different. I thought, this body's been created by God. It's been created to heal. And he also made herbs, there's water treatments, and they all just work together. So that really, you could say, blossomed my journey and my discovery on this amazing body that has an inbuilt ability to heal itself when it's given the right conditions. But I was very quickly confronted with the fact that many are sick through ignorance. They don't realize the very things they're doing to their body is contributing to the problem and sometimes even causing it. So I saw a great need for education. And in the early days, I'd tell my friends what I did, but when a crisis came, they just went to the doctor. And I thought, well, how can we bridge the gap between here's the natural medicine and the crisis? So I came at giving meetings. So my first meetings were in the early 90s, and I'd wrap my kids up in poultices and have their feet in hot water and wrap them in wet sheets. And of course, they were used to this because this is what Mum did. And we lived in a rainforest. They were homeschooled, and you know, kids, it's just what happens in the home. They think happens everywhere.
Of course.
And I actually found that it was a great way to break the ice, you know, having the kids there, and that was how I started. I think maybe my first meetings were something like 1992, and then I gave it to one group of people, and they filmed it, and then they went out, and nothing like now, but you know, little bits in
Mhm.
Australia, and that's where it all started, really.
Well, if somebody were to simply look you up on the internet, obviously there's a lot of, we'll say, diversity in opinions on what you do. And obviously, I'm a big fan, which is why you're here. Now, if somebody would look you up on YouTube, I mean, most of the videos that are posted, hundreds of thousands of views per
Yeah,
video. There are little social media shorts people put on their phones and share across TikTok or Facebook or wherever they are, and they get millions of views. Yet all these medical associations just absolutely detest the work you do.
yeah.
And it's almost hysterical at this point. Like it
Do you know
what's happening there?
it is absolutely incredible. The Healthcare Complaints Commission banned me from some complaints about me, but you know, these people had never met me. They've never been to our retreat. It was really a difference of opinion. But you know that in their rules and guidelines, they're not supposed to pursue anything where there's a difference of opinion. So it obviously came from higher up. And we really think it's got to do with my husband's political party. It's called the Informed Medical Options Party. He's got a party that's just really saying, hey, give us the choice. Let us be informed. And of course, they hate that. So I had to go. I always say, how can there be a crime if there's no victim? But yes, apparently on Wikipedia, I'm a threat to public safety. So,
Mm,
and
yes.
sometimes where I go, they've booked me in, and then all of a sudden they've gone, oh, I'm sorry, but we're not to have you, but we're going ahead. We're just going to hire a hall ourselves. And I say, good on you. And I'd like to say, show me where I'm a threat. Just,
Hmm.
it's crazy. But do you know, recently the Healthcare Complaints Commission, only 10 days ago, they emailed me and said, we've had a complaint about your exposure on social media to reinvestigate you, but we've decided not to reinvestigate you. I know why they haven't, because what can they do about that?
Yeah. And it's wild. There's been pursuits of criminal charges in the UK because somebody said something that offended somebody else online and the police got involved. Not talking threats. It's just so crazy that the difference of opinion. And that's really what it is. I've watched your videos. I was a paramedic. I'm not a doctor, but I was a paramedic. I'm a holistic nutritionist. I spent years in school and I work with and consult for doctors. That's what I do. I'm a
Yeah,
medical lecturer, and your information is sound. Your
yeah,
science is
yeah.
solid. It's the conclusions that you come to using natural remedies that, frankly, if this got out worldwide, it could bankrupt big pharma, and that's bad.
People say, are you worried about your life? I say, not at all, not at all. I know that the all powerful God, if He's got a plan for me, no one can touch me. But in the next breath, I'm not presumptuous.
Of
I do
course.
what I can, but I, I won't hold back because it's
Mm.
wrong. It's wrong, you know. And I love the statement that truth is stronger than error and right will prevail over wrong. That's the fact.
Well, let's talk about some of those rights because you are such an abundant wealth of knowledge, and I know we scheduled in for an hour. I would take up 6 straight hours of your time if we were allowed to. That would seem inhumane, but you are such an abundance of knowledge. So I'd love to tap into some of that here, Barbara. You know, let's talk about the gut and its connection to disease, right? As you know, about 72% of Americans complain of gut issues like bloat, gas, constipation, diarrhea, heartburn, like something about once a week, right? It's so frequent that most doctors are just considering that normal. Is that normal?
No, it is not normal. And I say to, you know, it's like I'll just give you one illustration. A lady said to me, I heard about the dangers of the hybridized wheat, so I stopped it. She said, I can't believe my energy. I can't believe that for so long I've been living with this low energy, thinking it's age, thinking it's, running after kids all day. And it was just that simple thing. So that's an illustration. This lady thought it was normal. But it wasn't till she changed a few things that she realized it is not normal.
Well, it's funny because there's a new term, I'm not sure if you're familiar with, called mansplaining. And it's when men explain things to women that women don't want men explaining.
No, I
So
haven't
I've
heard
done,
that one. I like it.
well, you can put that on a t-shirt if you like. So I've done some work with PCOS in the past, and my wife used to have really crippling periods, a lot
Yeah,
of pain, a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
cysts. She would have a lot of depression and craving and mood swings. And I've done a lot of work in female hormones because hormones realistically can be pretty easy to balance if the roots are that apparent. And I've been in a lot of trouble from mansplaining to women, like, hey, like your cycle can actually be improved. But they didn't want to hear it from me. But there's also this normalcy accepted that PMS is normal, severe
That's
breast
right.
tenderness, all this
That's right.
cramping, bloating, pain, mood swings, depression. Like, is that normal?
I've got some very good news. No, it is not normal. But when I give a hormone lecture, I say, I hope there are some men here because every man has a daughter or a sister. He definitely has a mother and a wife. And so, they need to understand what's happening to their women.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a big fan of The Office. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it. There's this scene, it's Will Ferrell, and he puts his hand up in the office. He's trying to make it sure everybody knows he's not sexist. He says, put your hand up if you know somebody with a vagina. And put your hand up if you have a vagina. See, I have both hands up. I'm not sexist. And it's so
Well,
important because we all have women in our lives.
I tell you something also sad and funny. There was a teacher that did our program at Misty Mountain, and she said, we're not allowed to call boys boys or girls girls. And I had
Mm.
to separate them, for, either side. And she said, those with a vagina go that side, those with a penis go that side. And they said, Miss? And she said, well, you know what you've got. But
I love that.
But I,
I love
I
it.
think it's funny, but I think it's sad, in some
Mm.
ways that you can't call a girl. Anyway, that's a whole nother issue.
That's a whole politically charged issue that
Oh,
I
yes.
definitely have my stance on firmly, and
Oh, yes.
everybody can pick their own
That's right.
choices.
That's right. And,
But
God's government is a government of freedom. And freedom is based
absolutely,
on free choice.
you can say and do whatever you want, and
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
for that.
Oh, yeah.
But let's talk about the gut a bit here, Barbara. You mentioned the 5 allergens. Can we explore those? Just in case our editor cuts off that beginning introduction, can you run through them again with me and
Sure.
explore those 5 allergens that are creating so many issues with gut and
I
disease?
certainly will because we find stopping these allergens makes a huge difference. And in many, many areas, even in asthma and eczema, but we're going to keep to the gut. So the 5 allergens are dairy, wheat, oats, peanuts, and refined sugar. Let me explain. What's the matter with wheat? Well, the problem was it was hybridized in the 1950s. And that hybridization of the wheat changed the protein or the gluten structure. So it's a structure that's very difficult for the gut to break down, especially in a compromised gut. So what's wrong with dairy? Haven't people have been eating dairy, milk, cheese for centuries? They have, but you have a look way back. It used to be organic. It used to be from Lulabelle the cow. It used to be raw milk. But I have to tell you, I'm a fifth generation Australian. I've never been able to handle milk. I'm Scottish descent, so it's obviously not in my genes. If it's in the genes, definitely the person can handle it more than if it's not in the person's genes. Australia did a survey, they found 60% of Australians were sensitive or intolerant to milk. Now, if that was raw milk, that could be brought down to 30%. And so people say to me, what milk do you drink? I say, I'm weaned, I eat food. So when you think about it, milk's for babies. But I do acknowledge that there are some dairy farmers, and it's been in the family for generations, and they quite possibly have the enzymes that the gut requires to break that down efficiently. But I have found in the majority of people with a compromised gut, the dairy can be an irritant. I do acknowledge raw, organic yogurt and feta may not be an irritant because it's already broken down. So the next one is oats. So what's the matter with oats? The Scottish have been eating oats for centuries, but if you have a look at how the Scottish prepare their oats, they soak it all day, they cook it slowly all night, and that disarms the lectins. So lectins, if they're in the food and get into the blood, they can cause inflammation. So ideally, with a compromised gut, the oats are eliminated until they're healed. I have 3 sons. They're big, strong young men. They eat oats for breakfast every morning and they love them. They're no problem. So my point is, in a healthy body, it can usually handle them, but not in a compromised gut. The next one is peanuts. Peanuts is commonly contaminated with mold. And so you don't want anything like that going into a compromised gut. If mold or yeast is on a food, it can just feed those Candida albicans yeasts in the gut. And the problem usually, or part of the problem, is a imbalance in the yeast and the bacteria. So it's best eliminated. And the 5th one is refined sugar. Refined sugar is a pure acid, and it will just feed anything. When I mean anything you don't want, any harmful microbes. And if there is a overload of yeast in the gut, you can imagine what refined sugar will do to that. So we find eliminating those 5 allergens is an important part in healing the gut.
So if somebody's got gut issues or dealing with whatever it may be, some less than ideal state, bloat, gas, constipation, diarrhea, IBS, IBD, like any kind of diagnosis or non-diagnosis, or I should say non-diagnosed gut issue of some kind, right away, dairy, wheat, oats, peanuts, and refined sugar, cut those 5.
Yes. Now, I also, at the next breath, I say it's not necessarily forever. It's just until it's conquered.
Right. So let's talk about some of those next steps then. So after we've cut these things out and someone's dealing with some gut issues, like I said, either diagnosed or non-diagnosed, they cut out the dairy, wheat, oats, peanuts, and refined sugar. What are some of the next steps you'd have the general population take? Obviously, person to person is dependent.
Well, much depends on the symptoms. And as you know, Josh, we're about 10 yards long. Some authors say 8 yards. Dr. Kellogg maintained it was 10 yards long. That's a lot of area. So I always look at symptoms. And symptoms is the body saying, can you help me here? So if a person feels discomfort straight after eating, that's a clear indication we've got a stomach issue. And that could be low hydrochloric acid. It could be a few things. But then we've got our small intestine, which takes up a lot of room, down to the large intestine. So some of the symptoms that there's a problem is, yes, bloating. And one would look at when the bloat is. If it's straight after the meal, it's stomach. If it's a few hours after the meal, it can be further down. Diarrhea, certainly a problem. Bleeding from the colon, large problem. So you work on those. So if someone's, you see, Dr. Kellogg, he said 3 intakes of food should equal 3 evacuations a day. And a lot of people are surprised at that. Dr. Kellogg said 1 bowel movement a day is constipation. That surprises most people. So then we have a look at the feces itself. And this is not something everyone's comfortable in doing, but I believe we all should be our own doctor. And having a little look, it will give you some indications. So yes, it should be softly formed, ideally float, and it should be the colour of, say, mid-brown, this lovely wood I've got on the wall behind me, something like that. So that's what you're looking at. If it's full in diarrhea, we've got a big problem. So your question, Josh, probably would depend on the symptoms.
Very fair. I get asked all the time, what supplements can I take? What probiotics should I take? And it's so much more complex than that.
Oh, yeah.
Really can't give one blanket response and say, well, here's what you should take, because then there'd be one company who makes one pill and
Yeah.
there'd be no health issues in the world.
Well, well, do you know what I also know, and I think you do too, Josh? There's no wonder cure. If
Hmm.
there was a wonder cure, it's called the human body when it's given the right conditions. And I find one of the hardest things I have to do is to teach people to trust and listen. Try the slippery arm. If it slows down, what's the body saying? Yes, I like this. If it doesn't slow down, it doesn't mean it's not working. It just might mean you need a little bit more. So encouraging people, because from children we've been taught, you get sick, you go to doctor, you give all your health to doctor, he gives you tablet, you go home, you're better. But of course the research is now showing that if you didn't go to the doctor and if you didn't get the pill, you probably get better anyway.
Hmm.
But I also find that a lot of people are disillusioned with the medical profession because they are quickly finding that drugs don't cure disease. Now, they might save a life in a crisis, absolutely, but we're talking about disease here. They might mask the symptoms, but they don't cure. And so now they've gone to naturopath, and now they want to give their health over to the naturopath. And that's where I think education is so important. Teaching people, listen to your body, respect it, look after it. And when it's happy, write down exactly what you did. What was that you ate that made the stomach so happy? And if it's not happy, quickly sit down and write down, well, what did you just eat? Because it can often be that simple.
It's funny when you talk about symptoms, because you said earlier the symptom is the body asking for help. And I often describe it, your symptoms, your body screaming, saying,
Yeah.
help me. And we go to the doctor and we get medication, and all we do is put tape over its mouth and go, look, I couldn't hear it. It's not screaming. I fixed it. And it's just not how it works.
It actually
The
does
body,
defies reason, really.
absolutely. There's a great analogy that's been floating around more and more. It's a check engine light. Well, you unplug the light doesn't mean there's not a problem. It just means
No,
you can't see it.
no,
And so
no. That's
we've kind
that's
of,
right. So it's re-education. It's re-education. My favourite email is, I was having problems. I watched your lecture. I did it. I have no problems now. I love it. There was no actually interaction with me. They just heard the information, did it, and the body said yes. But you like this, Josh, and I read this from a book called The Gift of Pain by Dr. Paul Brand. He said, if you don't listen to the first whisper, the body will start screaming. And when it starts screaming, it's doing damage. So it's listening to that first whisper and then acting on it.
I love it.
Mm.
You know, you practice a style of healthcare that is by far the least profitable way of healthcare
Yes,
ever.
yes, yes.
And I think that's why you're loved and respected worldwide, is because you're not following the money, you're following the people and
Yeah,
what they need. You're following the science, and truly, like, not chosen cherry pick science, but really the non-bias, here's what it is, science.
that's
And
right.
so we're at this stage now. We've got dairy, wheat, oats, peanuts, sugar. We've taken those out. The body's starting to feel a little bit better, and then we're giving our gut some help, some assistance. We're
Yeah.
we're taking slippery elm to kind of produce that mucous membrane to help bulk up the stools, to help things move through a little easier. Are there any? I don't like the word hacks, because it's kind of a cop out. I think of a word. I think it gets um, over popularized in social media. But for lack of a better term, are there any hacks or tips you give people in general to say, you know what, maybe it's fennel or cardamom or peppermint or lemon balm? Like, are there a lot of plants you use the vast majority of the time for most people's digestion to help improve some of that?
There definitely are. There definitely are. And I'd like to start at the top. You see, I say to people, your mouth's the only place you have say over. You have say over what goes in. You have say over when it goes in. You say how often it goes in. You have say over how long it stays in the mouth. Because I say there's no teeth in the stomach. You got to chew well. And we have say over the environment of entry. Now, that affects all the way down. And I find one of the most common problems I see today is low hydrochloric acid, because there's no such thing as high hydrochloric acid. If someone says I've got too much acid, I say, wow, you'd be digesting well, because the fact is dogs have 10 times the hydrochloric acid of humans. And if you look what they eat, rotten, dead animals, that would kill us. So it's often low hydrochloric acid. And there are simple things you can do to boost that. But first of all, I'd like to define the fact that digestion takes 3.5 to 4 hours. So the people have to stop putting food in every 2 hours. That exhausts the hydrochloric acid, beats it up. And they've got to stop drinking with their meals because that waters down the hydrochloric acid. And they've got to start having their main meal at breakfast and lunch, because when the sun goes down, our body knows everything slows down. So that's what I like to look at first. Let's ascertain the cause. And don't eat on the run. If someone rings me and I'm in the middle of lunch, you know what I say? I'm busy. Very important part of the day is eating. In fact, one writer said, cast off care and anxious thought when you sit to dine. I love that very poetic saying. So you see, all of that needs to be addressed, but there certainly are some herbs that can give a little boost. And something that'll wake anything up is cayenne pepper. So even just 1/3 of a teaspoon in a little bit of water, thrown down just before the meal, that'll wake up those glands that are producing the enzymes that break down our food. And of course, one of the enzymes, an important one, is hydrochloric acid, or the juice of a lemon just before the meal. Lemon's acid where it should be, which is stomach, and alkaline where it should be, which is when it's drawn into our tissues. Also, 1/4 cup of hot ginger tea. The ginger is a lovely anti-nausea and also boosts digestion. But you mentioned fennel. Fennel is a very nice one. You could be even a little bit of hot fennel. You see, that hot water hitting the stomach, it's absorbed quickly. The problem more is a whole glass of water through the meal. Then that waters down the hydrochloric acid.
There's so many simple things we can do just to boost up digestion right from the beginning. It's
Yeah,
like building a house. You build a good foundation, you're going to have a better chance of making your house suck less.
that's right.
It's
That's right.
start
It'll
with our
stand.
foundations. Yeah, that is ideal. House on rock, not sand,
That's
right?
right.
So what is the role then? Because say we got low stomach acid, right? We're not digesting very well. We have this undigested food going through. We're causing inflammation. And now we've got leaky gut, right? Well, just for all of our listeners, if you have inflammation, you've got leaky gut. That's just how it is. The severity is kind of a sliding scale. So let's talk about that, Barbara. What is the role of the gut or leaky gut and disease processes within the body?
Well, our gut is lined with a lovely thick turf wall. That's what Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride calls it, a thick turf wall, in her book Gut and Psychology. And isn't that interesting? Gut and brain, very close. But let's get back to this thick turf wall. It's made up of Lactobacillus acidophilus bifidus bacterium and all the other lovely bacteria that come from that. But I have to tell you something a little bit amusing. I was watching a documentary on the gut, and they had a 70-year-old obstetrician there, and he said, we always thought God made a mistake putting the birth canal and the anus so close. In fact, 50 years ago, we used to give women enemas whenever they came to have a baby. And I love his next statement. He said, we now know it's a perfect design. Because when the birth canal opens, yes, the anus stretches too. So when the baby's born, the first air that the baby takes is the air coming out of the anus, which
It's a fart.
has those lovely bacteria in, and the baby swallows, and that bacteria starts to populate the gut, because in utero the gut is sterile. And then the first 3 days after a baby's born, the woman's breast has colostrum. The milk doesn't come in for 3 days. Thick, creamy, rich, cholesterol high colostrum. And that also helps to populate the gut. Now, there's a nice, thick gut turf flora, and the baby's immune system is built up from that thick gut flora. The problem is there are many things that break down that gut flora. That gut flora is responsible for the final breakdown, absorption, protection, and also nourishment. So when that gut flora is knocked out, basically that's the first step to leaky gut. So a lot of people throw the term leaky gut around, but I like to define exactly what it is. And of course, the cells that have lost part of their gut flora, they've lost their nourishment. So that's where there's also breakdown in those cells. There's an added continuation to this leaky gut. So things start to get into the blood that should never go into the blood. So what breaks down that lovely, thick gut flora? Antibiotics do a good job. I think that antibiotics can save lives, absolutely, but even the World Health Organization today is acknowledging the overuse of antibiotics. One writer said, when you take an antibiotic, it's like dropping an atomic bomb in the gut. What did the atomic bomb do? It killed the good and the bad alike. And so it's killing the good stuff. Long-term painkiller use can kill off that flora. All your statin drugs, many drugs kill off that gut flora. Refined sugar, it does a good job at feeding the yeast that are left over from the antibiotics killing off the good bacteria. And there's this perfect storm happens in the gut. So what's the first step? The first step is to repopulate the gut, because it's that gut flora that's feeding the cells. And so let's go to Germany and look at their wonderful sauerkraut. The sauerkraut, all those cultured foods, and your yogurts, your kefirs, your misos, every country traditionally had some form of cultured food. And then you mentioned slippery elm, Josh. Slippery elm is a wonderful herb. It coats, soothes, and heals the lining of the gut. And it even contains a growth stimulant. And that growth stimulant can stimulate those cells lining the gut to even start regrowing. So you see there's a few things that come here. Totally eliminate all foods with lectins. A good gut flora will disarm lectins, and lectins, when they get into the blood, it's what you mentioned, Josh, inflammation. So we get in this vicious cycle. So until the gut is healed, there needs to be some serious steps taken to repopulate and heal that gut. And there's another herb, aloe vera, nice and slimy. Well, that's what the gut is, slimy. So that, and it also contains a growth stimulant. And here's one way you test it. You've got an aloe vera leaf, cut about an inch off it, and then look how long it takes for a skin to grow. 1 hour. That's because it contains a growth stimulant. So the aloe vera going into the lining of the gut does wonders.
So we're really talking about here and so many basic things we can do to help aid our gut. Obviously, for those who are planning on having children or currently pregnant or nursing, of course, vaginal birth, breastfeeding is ideal. We talked about cutting out some of these base foods just so the body can heal, like dairy, wheat, oats, peanuts, and refined sugar. We talked about increasing stomach acid and aiding right from the mouth, chewing the food properly, making sure you're digesting. And we're doing our best to prevent leaky gut. So let's say then it's too late, right? Of course, we've got inflammation, we've got this bloat, this leaky gut, we have macromolecules, things that are just too big to be in the blood are leaking into our blood, our lymphatics, and we have this full body inflammation, right? We know the CDC, the top 15 causes of death, 14 out of 15 are chronic inflammatory conditions, which can all be traced back to the gut. The 15th cause is self-harm or injury. And so if it's not physical trauma, it's something we're basically doing to ourselves that's killing us. And so we are highly inflamed and highly toxic. What do we do about it? Do we work on detoxification? Of course, you've already addressed the gut. Like, what are the next steps?
Yes, I also think you may have found this too, Josh, that When someone's gut is highly inflamed, they can't even handle raw food. That grated carrot, that grated carrot, and that grated raw beetroot, that can be a little harsh.
Barbara, we cook everything.
And sorry, raw fooders. We had a lady come to me, little tiny lady, late 70s, terrible diarrhea, and her daughter had her on a raw diet. We stopped the raw immediately. And that's what Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride said. She looks at all countries and she said, do you know that most countries' traditional food was just thick soup, thick vegetable soup, and maybe a few bones thrown in it. And it's like the Italians, the pizza and the pasta were more special occasions. That was the minestrone soups. So we've got to look at the food because the food's the only thing that touches the gut. So starting with that, even white rice, some people are surprised to hear me say white rice, but when you've got a very inflamed gut, you don't want any fibre. You've got to heal that gut. The fibre can come, but first of all, heal the gut. So the thick lentil stews, and some say, well, Barbara, what about all the important things in the raw foods? Well, they can have carrot juice. So carrot, we usually do 80% carrot, 10% celery, 10% apple. And you talked about maybe stopping food for a while, and sometimes that is necessary. And they could have a couple of juice days and then go on to the thick vegetable stews. Their body will tell them. Now, I'm only a little light lady. I'm only about 100 pounds. I don't do well fasting for too long. If I turn sideways, you wouldn't see me. So this is my point too. You've got to have a look at the person. Now, someone who's 300 pounds, they could probably go without solid food for 3 or 4 days. But so this little tiny lady that came to me, we were cautious. We only fasted her one day and then we put her on the cooked food. So again, Josh, you're looking at the person. And too long, medicine has this protocol. You have a heart attack, no matter who you are, no matter how it happened, there's a protocol, a program. You just put on it whether you need to or not. But I like to think with natural medicine, we're talking about a person here. We're talking about what you can do that. And even the mind, if a person almost starts to have a mental breakdown when I mention fasting, well, we're not going to fast them. We'll just put them on the thick soups. For some people maybe who've had childhood trauma and food was their only comfort, to stop them eating for 2 days, they almost have a breakdown. So you're looking at the person too. And I always throw things by people because the mind and the gut are so closely connected. I say, well, what about juice for a day? No. Okay, well, what about just think stews for, yeah. And I find that when the stomach says yeah, the brain says there. You might have found that. So I talk to them, and for people who just almost go into a breakdown that they can't have raw food, I say, well, you can have avocado, banana, those soft foods. So, and then again, when you do take it, what's the body now saying? Maybe when they took the banana, the diarrhea increased. Okay, we stop the banana. So you're listening, you're watching. And some people say, Barbara, how long do I have to have slippery elm 3 times a day? I said, well, as long as your body tells you. What's your body saying to you? And I'm not critical of them. I understand we've been trained to be like this, to be told what to do. And some people get annoyed with me that I won't tell them what to do. I say, try this and see what the body says. Try that and see what the body says. So often I'm saying, well, what did your body say?
It's so interesting that I think we've been deconditioned to listening to our bodies.
Yeah.
Babies, children. I used to work for a company doing personal safety training. We go into schools and, we talk about, like, there's a classic, like, stranger danger. We talk to kids, like, yes, sometimes strangers can be helpful.
Yeah.
And so really teaching these kids to listen to their intuition.
Yeah.
If there's somebody trying to harm you or something dramatic and you can run to a stranger, well, what stranger should you find? What do you have to listen to? What is your belly like? What does your gut feel
Yeah.
like? And I think we lose that as adults,
Yeah.
whether it's through social conditioning or TV or food or medical or whatever it is. We no longer listen to our guts and our intuition.
Yeah.
Almost like if adults are in a dangerous situation, well, it might be awkward if I ran away, or it might be awkward if, I asked for help, or it might make them feel uncomfortable. And we do the same thing to our bodies where, well, no, it's fine, it's normal. My doctor said it's not a big deal. But our intuition, our body intuition just
Oh,
knows.
absolutely. And I have to, at this point, introduce you to my husband's favourite saying. I don't believe them.
Hmm.
In fact, someone will show him their blood test, and you know what Michael will say to them? Oh, I don't believe that. And people are shocked. And I say, do you know, they don't always get it right. And yet people never question it. They never question it. See, my husband, Michael, this is our second marriage. We've been married 25 years. His first wife was having a baby, and he was 25, and they said, the heart rate's gone down, we're going to have to do a Caesar. And Michael said, no, you're not. And they said, excuse me, Mr. O'Neill, your wife and your baby might die. And he said, no, I know God made babies to come out that way. He would not let them. Do you know the baby was born? I said to Michael, where did this come from in you? That how many people can stand up to doctor and say, actually, no, thank you. Actually, no, you're not doing that. We put too much trust in that profession and not enough trust in our bodies.
It's really interesting because a lot of us, we don't have that knowledge and we don't do the research. It's exactly that.
Yeah,
We sort of just blindly trust. And
yeah,
modern medicine is great at emergencies and surgery.
absolutely. Absolutely. They saved my sister's life when a drunk driver hit her on the road. They saved her life.
Mhm,
I know that. And so
mhm.
we're not talking about emergencies.
Of course, yeah. This is chronic disease, and what Western medicine does, they're great at emergencies and surgeries, but terrible at chronic disease because they treat all chronic disease as if it's an acute condition, and all we do is mask the symptoms,
That's
and people
right.
stay sick.
That's
Like
right.
we talk, right? Like you had said, when there's screaming, there's damage. Well, if you're just masking the symptoms, there's screaming for years, for decades, and this
Yeah.
damage piles up.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And you're right. The screams keep getting masked. See, my first car was a Fiat, and it had a little blue light when I needed oil. Well, that blue light could be annoying. I smash it with a hammer. Now I haven't got that annoying sound, but oops, the car stops.
Oops. Yeah. Well, let's talk about something here, Natasha, because I specialize, as I mentioned earlier, I specialize in inflammatory bowel disease,
Yeah.
right? Your Crohn's and colitis. And in the Western world, every single case of Crohn's and colitis is autoimmune. And every single case needs meds. In every single case, there's nothing we can
Yeah.
do. Just hope to God that
Yeah.
one day we don't cut your organs out. And I'm actually lecturing now at a functional medicine academy. With just, I've been very, very blessed to get in touch with some of the best doctors who are just, they're functional integrative medicine doctors, and they work at the FLCCC. They're the guys who are putting their careers out there, saying, nope, there's a better way to do
Oh
COVID than
yeah.
just vaccinate,
Yeah.
vaccinate. And so I'm lecturing, actually doing one in November, and I'm talking about IBD and IBS as a sliding scale rather than blanketing. Obviously, we know that they are similar in symptoms, right? They're similar conditions in presentation,
Yeah.
but scientifically, right, biologically, they are different. However, if we just black and white call every case of IBD autoimmune without really considering that it could just be, I look at the gut. I've said this on many of my episodes before. If we have IBS, you're wearing a pair of shoes without a sock and it rubs and gets irritated, then it gets red, then it blisters and it gets raw and it starts to bleed. That's sort of the scale of IBS to IBD before it truly becomes autoimmune and the body's immune system goes haywire and starts attacking itself. And can you walk us through that process and what you see that being, what you see, whether it's autoimmune or progressive disease? I just want to hear what's going on in your brain when I say that.
Well, we have to remember too what my husband says. I don't believe that.
Mm.
we've seen so many apparently autoimmune diseases totally heal. Rheumatoid arthritis totally heal. The joints go back to normal. Crohn's, irritable bowel, people have been suffering for 30 years. In 1 week, they're not healed. But in 1 week, they're no longer bleeding. There's no more cramps. The full-on diarrhea has gone down to soft in 1 week. So the autoimmune disease, you see, what we have to do now is we have to go to Newton's third law of motion. To every action, there's an equal and an opposite reaction. There's a cause. And unfortunately, this is what medicine doesn't do. You've got a friend.
Bruce, he just got up out of bed.
So the cause, there's always a cause. So what does this mean? Does this mean medicine is now unscientific? Because what's basic science? There is a cause. And Rudyard Kipling, he wrote a poem on this. He says, I have 6 trusty serving men. They taught me all I know. Their names are what, where, when, where, how, and who. So why? Why is this happening? So I go back and go, aha. And this huge inflammatory response, no wonder. It's not an autoimmune disease at all. And I know that you are aware of the mind-body connection. So if someone's told you've got an autoimmune disease, they say, oh, I've got an autoimmune disease. It's incurable. The body says, oh, we can't heal. Mm-hmm. So you get this vicious cycle. And his book, The Brain That Changes Itself, Dr. Norman Doidge, a neurologist, he addresses this subject very, very well. His book is full of stories of people who were told they would never heal, they would never. So you've got to address that brain body connection. And a lady said to me, I'm thinking of putting a t-shirt, I don't believe them. Michael O'Neill. So that's what you've got to do. You've really got to say, thank you for your opinion, sir. I'll seriously consider it. And I'll seriously consider your advice. And then they leave the office and see you or me and start to do the natural. Because the fact is, these so-called autoimmune diseases, we've seen people totally heal. I'm sure you've seen people totally heal. So I don't think they are autoimmune diseases. I think all it is exactly your illustration is you've got a blister, you keep wearing that shoe, but what you do is you take a painkiller so you can't feel that shoe. And now the flesh has all broken away and the bone is exposed, but you keep wearing the shoe. Now, people don't do that because it's obvious, but it's inside. It's not obvious. It's not obvious. And in the book, The Gift of Pain, you'll just love that book. I love that book by Dr. Paul Brand. The Gift of Pain, he says pain has a purpose. It's time to listen to pain. Pain is your guide. Pain says you can go here, but you can't go here. It's a knock on the door. Please listen. Please listen. But the problem is when people get the pain, we've been taught to go to the doctor. So he'll say, oh, I think you've got irritable bowel. Take these anti-inflammatories and this steroid. As soon as they come into the equation, wow, that just feeds this so-called autoimmune disease because you haven't turned the tap off. If you don't turn the tap off, you're going to be mopping up in the corner. If you don't address the cause, you will never have a cure. So those basic principles, we have to start locking them into our brain.
It's so funny that it always comes back to the cause because I think in a lot of areas, people are often convinced the body makes mistakes. And you mentioned earlier back in the 80s, you became a Christian, you started seeing the body differently. And I know there's a lot of poo-pooing around mixing faith and medicine, but it's interesting because I'm in the same boat. It was just a couple of years back, I don't know, 8 years ago or so, maybe less, where I became a Christian. What it did is it actually shifted my idea of health and design and original design. And as soon as I came back closer to that and went, okay, if the body designed perfectly, right? Even if it's just theoretically, Right? For our listeners, just bear with me. If the body was perfectly designed, if the earth was perfectly designed, if all these things were designed to live in harmony together, what could that look like? And then we start to realize, well, all the foods we're eating are artificial. They were never originally there. 1,000 years ago, they didn't exist. My great grandmother wouldn't recognize it. I don't eat it, right? So we have number one. Number two, every toxin, everything we put on our body, whether it's makeup or I stopped using aluminum-based antiperspirants because they never
Yeah,
existed.
yeah,
Lo
yeah,
and behold,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
here, and I'll tell you a story, Barbara, because you mentioned these quick turnarounds. It's interesting because we almost get blocked at the border with the medical system today because it's such a box. I've got a 16-year-old I've been working with for a few months now. He's got Crohn's, and he's 5'7", I believe. He was down to 95 pounds, very
Mm.
very thin, right? And you're 100 pounds and how tall?
5'1" and a quarter.
Yeah, 5'1" and a quarter. That quarter is
Oh
important at
yes,
five
oh
foot
yes,
one.
oh yes.
So 5'1" and a quarter and 100 pounds. Now you got a teenage boy who's
Yeah,
5'7" and
yeah.
less than that at 95 pounds. His doctor had him on all these biologics and immunosuppressants and all these anti-inflammatories,
Eh,
and he was getting sicker and sicker. And we worked with him, Barbara, 1 month. He was
yeah.
already feeling better. Symptoms were gone. 2 months, he gained 25 pounds. I go back to
Mm,
the doctor.
mm.
You know what she says? I'm glad he's feeling better, but I don't love how you're doing it. And that is how we get blocked by medicine. I had another woman, 16 years, 17 years of ulcerative colitis, every drug, 8 specialists, 3 doctors at the Mayo Clinic, every biologic, everything, and constant blood, 30, 40, up to 50 bowel movements a day. It's basically a faucet on drip. Blood, pain compared to childbirth. And she's had kids. 3 weeks, completely symptom free. Bowels were
Yeah,
back. She got years to heal, but back to
yeah.
normal because we found her root.
That's
And
right.
this is Western
That's right.
medicine.
Because what I say is Western medicine now non-scientific? Because the
Mm,
basic law of science says that to every action there's an equal and an opposite reaction. There's always a cause. And Proverbs 26 verse 2 says the curse causeless shall not come. In other words, Old English, no curse happens without a cause. And God's ways are perfect. He never makes mistakes. He made an incredible body, but what's happened to that body? What's happened absolutely to our foods? And I like to think of it like this, Josh. I put it up on the board now. Let's look at medicine today. It's really based on fear. Here's one. It's based on fear. And why do most people go to hospital? Fear.
mm,
They fear. And it's based on a system that we evolved. We weren't created, we just evolved. So we cannot heal. So we need drugs. And we all know that the pharmaceutical company is a deceptive industry. There's
mm,
deceptions there, there's not truths. So let's go over to the other side now. This system, God's system, is based on faith. Faith in an incredible body with an inbuilt ability to heal itself. So it was created to heal. But it needs faith. And what's faith? If you concede, it's not faith. I'm not healed yet, but I believe I will heal. You see, that faith actually feeds the healing because you believe you will. And I'm sure you know the verse, it's Hebrews 11, verse 1. It says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence
mm,
of things not seen. So if you can see, it's not faith. So faith that the body can heal itself. And if it needs a little bit of help, Psalm 104 verse 14, God gave herbs for the service of man. This system is based on truth.
mm.
And when you see that written up on a board, it's very clear. It's black and white. Black and white.
It's interesting. There's a few things actually to cover here for our listeners, because again, the concept of adding faith in medicine will get poo-pooed quite a lot, and that's fair to those who maybe aren't there, don't understand it, and it's only because once I've taken that lens and taken that
Yeah,
view that I've been able to see such remarkable results in the clients that I see. But if we look at a few basic things, I mean, Martin Shkreli was a CEO of, I forget, there was a smaller pharmaceutical company, but he was on record saying, our I don't want to quote it exactly, but he was on record saying something to the effect of, our responsibility is to the shareholders, not to the patients. We're in the business of making money, not healing people, about curing people, what I've already said, right? And then you get pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer who have paid over 6 billion, that's billion with a B, $6 billion in criminal fines for fraudulent research, fraudulent,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
lying to the public. And
Yeah.
yet we put our trust in these
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
there's
what product is there no liability for? Only one: drugs,
vaccines.
vaccines.
Yeah,
Yeah, only one. And they're on record as saying we know that there are problems with this, so we have to protect ourselves. Eh.
protect the business,
So
not the
yeah,
people.
it's crazy. And I agree with you, Josh. There are some people who are on medication, and it is helping them, but it's actually
Of
masking their
course.
symptoms, and they're just coming into this. So I say to people, don't stop your medication straight away. Start to implement the lifestyle changes. And as everything settles down, listen and start to ease off the meds. Ease off the meds. You're the doctor. You're the one that only knows. That's why I have to get right back to the I am the master of my destiny. I am the one that chooses what I do with my body. And if someone says to me, I actually like my drugs and I want to stay on them, I say, I respect your choice.
Of course.
I respect your choice. Absolutely, because this government of freedom is a government of free choice and an absolutely free choice. But most people are sick through ignorance. So it's just making available to people, try this. And the point is, if you try a potato poultice on your swollen foot and it doesn't work, you've lost nothing.
Hmm.
But how many people have been on the drug medication for many years and they cannot stop? They have to ease off it so very slowly because now the body's addicted to it.
I'm a big believer in the integrative medicine approach, especially working in, the disease process that I see. I'll never, and I legally can't even tell people come off drugs and
No, no,
medication, and
no,
I won't tell them
no.
because these rebounds can be very dangerous, very detrimental,
Absolutely,
very
absolutely.
painful.
And that, I say to people, I have no authority over your medication, only you and your
Mhm,
doctor do. But this is what I would do. And I have
mhm,
got some very smart people that say to me, Barbara, what would you do if you were me?
mm.
I say, I'm so glad you asked me.
I do like legal jujitsu.
Yeah, this is what I do, but it is your choice. Yeah.
Mm. Well, there's a one thing I'd like to leave you and our listeners with. There is a short documentary called Rockefeller Medicine, and it talks about how the late 1800s we started to see herbalism and natural remedies that have been around for thousands and thousands of
Yeah.
years started to get scrubbed from medical textbooks, and they started to use petroleum products as pharmaceuticals to create these drugs and masking symptoms. And there's lots of stuff that has saved lives, penicillin and all kinds of basics we've seen that have really helped people. But at the end of the day, really going back to the roots, natural whole foods, better lifestyles, earthing, grounding, getting into nature. And this documentary sort of goes over how medicine got taken over and completely changed from this for everybody herbal access around the world to a for profit, regulated, controlled body where people will spend $10,000, $12,000 a month on biologic medication for these autoimmune conditions that, if we go back to our roots, could be completely and utterly reversed.
Yeah. 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 It's incredible. I was reading a book called The Story of Our Health Message on the starting of the health message in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And in that book, it was showing that in the mid-1800s, you could go to a college, there was a college, and you could come out as a medical doctor and they did not study drugs. Now, it is true George Washington was bled and bled and bled to death. There were some crazy things happening, and a lot of the drugs had mercury in them. And so there were doctors who were going to water therapies. And Dr. Jackson in New York, he had a health retreat there. This is in the late 1800s, called The Home. And he had a board of doctors on his staff. And he said, in 20 years, we have never used a drug. I love that. These are medical doctors. So people say, well, no wonder, because look at the drugs were being used, but the drugs now are different.
Mm.
You might have heard that.
Right.
The
Hmm.
drugs now are different. Well, do you know, one lady said this to me, and I really liked it. I thought it resonated. Drugs are like robots. I must do, whether you need it or not. I must do. Whereas herbs, it's almost as if herbs have an intelligence that actually work with the human body as to its needs. You could take a bucket full of cayenne pepper a day and never bleed to death. It's a great blood thinner, but it'll never make your blood so thin that you'll bleed to death. Whereas warfarin, rat poison, I've known people and their noses are bleeding, they brush their hand and bruises everywhere. If you're on warfarin and you take cayenne pepper, you'll bleed even more. But if you stop the warfarin and just take cayenne pepper, it's a wonderful blood thinner. There's no side effects. And again, you can't overdo it. But most people don't overdo it because it's pretty hot.
Yeah, it doesn't feel very nice.
No. It in itself says, back off a bit, please.
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty. Like you said, is plants work with the body. And I found that even in antimicrobials, right? Dealing with gut dysbiosis, these imbalances of bacteria, where if you use an antibiotic, it kills everything. It's the equivalent of the military trying to find one fugitive and they drop a nuclear bomb on an entire continent.
That's right.
Right? Just to get
That's
the
right.
one.
That's right.
The plants will seek it out.
That's
and the plant
right.
will keep balance. They feed the good, take down the bad.
That's right.
Now, I want to respect your time here, Barbara. I know we're just over our hour meeting here together, but I want one last question for you.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we've not talked about or not mentioned, wide open table, anything you'd like to say to the listeners who might be listening to this episode right now?
We've said a lot, and I've very much enjoyed what we've said. And if I were to leave anything with the listeners, I would say, trust your body. Trust it. Listen to it. It speaks to you. And respond. And if you don't get an answer, try a few other things. But the fact is, it can heal. And it will heal if you're given the right conditions. How long will it take? It all depends on how serious the condition is, and it all depends on how diligent the person is to do what you've got to do to bring about healing. And I love the verse in the Bible. It's in Galatians 6 verse 9. It says, let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we will reap if we faint not. So here's another factor that we did not mention, and that's time. It takes time. I say to people, it took 20 years to get to this, but it won't take 20 years to turn around, but it might take 1 or 2 years. And we're not used to that with medicine. You've got a rash, you put cortisone on, rash goes. So people want a herbal equivalent, but there actually isn't one, because even though the rash goes, 2 weeks later it comes back twice as bad. So it actually doesn't go. If you've got a bad headache and you take a drug, the headache will go, but that drug has actually harmed your kidneys, it's harmed your liver. So with natural medicine, it's important to be patient. It's important to keep what you're doing. And even though it takes a little while to heal, I find that when you start the natural treatments, people are getting responses fairly quickly. They're not, it's like the ones you talked about, the ones I talked about that got those results in a week. They're not better, but their body has just said to them, I like this. So what everyone is to listen for carefully is, I like this. Let's keep doing it. And I love where the Bible says in 1 Thessalonians 5:21, prove all things. That's a challenge. That's a challenge to each one of us. Try it and prove it. It says, prove all things and hold fast to whatever is good. I eat like this because I love what it does to me. People say, do you ever step sideways? I say, why would I? Why would I? I love what this does for me. And I'm at an age where most people are retired and in old folks' homes. But I'm not ready for that. I still like climbing mountains. And when Michael said, you can retire if you like, I said, I think it would be wrong because I feel just as good as I felt in my 40s. I've got more information and more experience in my brain than I have ever had. It'd be wrong to stop now. It'd be wrong. And I think it's very sad when our most brilliant minds retire. We need those brilliant minds in so many fields, but they have to retire because they've got diabetes and heart disease and arthritis, and the physical brings them down, but the mind, we need to share, and we need to make this information available.
Well, I respect that so much. And it really is a service mentality. And the entire community, those who are looking to heal, get well, and find the real roots of their health, are so grateful for you being here and being so diligent, sharing your message just endlessly until your last breath. We appreciate you.
And I'm sure you'd agree with me, Josh, this is the best work in the world, isn't it?
Oh, I
I
love it.
say to my
I
sons,
really do.
they renovate houses, renovate gardens, renovate bathrooms. We renovate bodies. But actually, we don't do the renovation. We just give the information and we watch as these incredible bodies, with their inbuilt ability to heal, this living machinery, responds. No matter what the age, it starts to respond. That's really nice.
I can't think of a better way to wrap up today's talk than that. Exactly. Barbara, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your expertise, your years. This has been an absolute delight, and I'm really looking forward to getting this one out.